Welcome to the Sage Solutions podcast, where we talk about all things personal growth, personal development, and becoming your best self. My name is David Sage, and I am a self-worth and confidence coach with Sage Coaching Solutions. Today's podcast is actually my favorite topic, a topic that is more important than probably any other topic I will cover on this podcast, at least in my opinion. Which makes it no surprise that it's one of my 5 core fundamentals: focus on your locus of control. Today I am also joined by my lovely wife and co-host, Hannah Sage.
Hey guys, so locus of control is something that I know a little bit about, but I haven't really done too much research and delved deeper into the topic. So I'm excited to see what David has to teach you and I today about locus of control.
Awesome. I'm glad that you're excited because I've been excited to cover this topic since we first started the podcast. But before we get into it, our goal with this podcast is to share free, helpful tools with you and anyone you know who's looking to improve their life. So take action. Subscribe and share this podcast with them.
I'm going to kick some things off here. So David, first of all, what is locus of control?
A locus of control is the degree to which people believe they, as opposed to external forces, have control over the outcome of events in their lives. The psychological concept of a locus of control was developed by Julian B. Rotter in 1954. And has since become an aspect of personality psychology. So what that really means is that our locus of control, our personal locus of control, is how we view the world as to whether we internally have control over the outcomes of events in our life, or whether external or outside forces are what actually control the outcomes in our lives. And it's a sliding scale. At each end of that scale, we have a pure internal locus of control or a pure external locus of control. As I'm sure you're probably already aware, we use some shades of gray thinking here. Almost nobody actually falls fully on one end of the spectrum or fully on the other. Most human beings are somewhere in the middle.
In the middle of the external and internal locus of control?
Yes, exactly.
Interesting. What are the differences between internal versus external locus of control?
So, somebody with an external locus of control believes that outside forces are what control their life, their destiny, their outcomes.
Would that be based on, luck? They think, oh, I've got bad luck, I've got good luck. Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah, it's more than just that, but that is definitely a part of it. Somebody with an external locus of control would essentially believe that they are sort of at the whims of life and that things are other people's fault, that they just either have bad luck or possibly good luck, and that they didn't really have that much agency or that much control or that much power over the situation because life, the world, other people made things happen that way.
Almost as if it's like their destiny, right? Would you say?
Yeah, I would say that that's actually a reasonably accurate way of portraying an external locus of control. The only problem that I have with that is usually when people think of a destiny, they think of it as a good thing, right? Mm-hmm. And I would say it's almost more like fate.
Interesting.
Whatever happens to them, they're just kind of being blown around by the wind because they don't actually have any control over it, and it was their fate. There's nothing that they could have done, and often these people fall into a victim mindset very easily because when you believe that the world is out to get you and that you don't have any power, it's easy to see yourself as a victim of fate.
Woe is me. Well, that covers external locus of control. Now, can you explain what internal locus of control is?
Sure. Someone with an internal locus of control believes that they have agency in this situation. They believe that they have control. They believe that they ultimately are the one that determines their own destiny or their own fate. See, it's not really important whether you actually believe in destiny or fate. It's more like, what are the direct outcomes of everything in my life, and do I have any control over them, or is it all outside forces? Somebody with that internal locus of control believes that they can do something about this. They believe that they are in control of their life and that they are responsible for their life so that they can take ownership, which gives them power. It gives them agency. It gives them control, and it actually puts them in this driver's seat.
Well, if you were to ask me, I feel like I would much prefer the internal and feeling like I'm in control and I can change my fate, my path, and choose for myself.
You kind of beat me to the punch there, but yes, exactly. An internal locus of control is a much more empowering mindset to have. Nothing will steal your agency and your power faster than having a pure external locus of control. It's almost like a state of learned helplessness. Being in that victim mindset puts you in a state of having no control, no agency. It makes you feel powerless. Nothing is more debilitating than feeling like you can't do anything about anything. Having a pure external locus of control shatters your sense of certainty. Because if you don't have any control over anything in your life, how are you ever supposed to meet your need for certainty? Now, on the flip side, virtually all successful people have an internal locus of control. Because having that internal locus of control allows them to actually be the one steering the ship, to be in control of their own destiny, to take action, to make things happen, to have courage. You get so much farther when you're not just being blown around by the wind, but when you're walking in a direction that you choose.
I like how you put that. So with your locus of control, and whether you handle it internally versus externally, are you able to change it? Say I grew up and I see everything as an external thing, a little bit more of the victim mindset. Am I able to learn and develop and switch later on in life to an internal locus of control?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. Will it be easy if you are that far on that end of it? No, it's going to take some time to reshape your beliefs surrounding that.
Awesome. Okay, that's good to hear.
Well, let's start with this. Everyone starts with an external locus of control.
How so?
As infants, we don't have any control. As a baby, you are forced to see the world as a place where you don't have control because you physically can't control much of anything. You have some influence over your parents by crying and trying to signal things to them, but you can't actually feed yourself, change yourself, get yourself water. You actually are in a state of having a almost purely external locus of control and believing that is both correct and accurate.
So if you have an external locus of control, you're basically like a baby, a child.
Okay, I'm not trying to shame people. That's not what I'm getting at. I'm saying we all start out with that. And through our experiences, essentially nobody has that much of an external locus of control.
Okay, so we all kind of start off at the same playing field.
Yeah, we start on the furthest end of the spectrum, and then throughout life, based on our experiences and the way that we interpret the world, we move from that. Now, different people, based on their life experiences, form different perspectives that move them further or not so far from where we started.
Okay, cool. So how do we consciously start the process of switching over from that natural external locus of control to an internal locus of control?
So this is where my actual fundamental comes in. While an internal locus of control is definitely much more helpful than an external locus of control, that is comparing two completely opposite ends of a spectrum. And frankly, if you take an internal locus of control to an extreme, and you're not using any shades of gray thinking, that has its own problems too. If you had a purely internal locus of control, then you would also be taking responsibility and ownership for things that you truly objectively have no control over. Like, if you got cancer, it would be your fault. That's ridiculous. Nobody should be blaming themselves for certain things that are completely out of their control. If you walked out of your house and got struck by lightning, that is not something you should be blaming yourself for. There are events that happen in our lives that we objectively have no control over, and they just happen. So what I want to talk to everyone about today is forming your true, objective locus of control. Take a step back and look at your life. What we're trying to do is combine a primarily internal locus of control with a realistic look of what things are objectively out of your control and deserve to have an external locus of control. This requires shades of gray thinking. Look at how things play out. Look at where the control lies with an honest and objective evaluation. Take all of your emotions out of it. Figure out where you have agency. Where could you have control? Where is there something that you can do about something, right? Even if it's tiny bits of agency. What we need to do is look at what we have control over in any given situation and throughout life, and then figure out where we have absolutely none. Once we've done that, you can focus on what you can control and stop worrying and spending time on things that you can't. So what I'm telling you to do is find and use your true locus of control, or to focus on your locus. I don't know of a perspective that is more powerful or helpful than this one. In my Perspectives of Reality episodes, part 1 and 2, when I was referring to a helpful mindset, this was the one I was thinking about the most. Focus on your locus.
That's super cute and easy to remember.
Yeah, it's essentially my mental reminder or almost affirmation to remind myself and ground myself in doing this practice, in focusing on my locus of control, on figuring out what I can control, using that agency, using the power that I have over the situation, and not worrying or spending time over what I can't, like I said. This frees up so much time and effort and energy to use on productive things. The amount of freedom that you get from not worrying, not spending time, not obsessing over things that you can't do anything about is hard to even put into words. It's this wonderful sense of freedom and energy that you are freeing up, that you were spending being anxious about things, worrying about things, just the acceptance of the fact that there are things that you just can't do anything about brings you this inner peace. And then you have that extra energy to put towards all of the things that you can do something about, which means that you've now become that much more efficient at actually accomplishing the things that you want to in your life and doing the things that you want, or having fun, or being present and in the moment. There are a million different choices we can make. There's always some form of agency in some situation. Choosing not to worry about something is using your agency. If you take the victim mindset, which is essentially the opposite of this mindset, it steals all of that agency, steals your control. You have now lost all of the accountability and ability to improve anything that's going on. While it might be easier to just blame everything else, and that might make it pretty easy to justify doing nothing, it's wildly unhelpful. What is the point of worrying about, focusing on, and ruminating on things you have no control over? It's unhelpful, unproductive, and will make you feel powerless and frustrated. I try to spend as little time on things that I can't control as possible. And it's okay to admit that you can't control certain things. Once again, it frees up that much more time and energy to focus on my agency and what I do have control over. One helpful way to picture this is as a Venn diagram. All of the things in any given situation that you have control over are one circle. All of the things that you don't have any control over are another circle. And where they meet, that in-between part of a Venn diagram, where the two circles make sort of an eyeball shape, is where your influence is. See, this is where you have some control, but you really don't have control. You may be able to influence other people, but you ethically should not be controlling other people. And for the most part, you can't control other people. You can't control how they feel. They have their own locuses of control. They have their own brains. And there are many things in the outside world that you don't have pure, full, direct control over. And sometimes you use your agency on your influence. And sometimes you should just let it be.
So there's obviously some major mental health benefits to switching your locus of control from an external to an internal. I feel like being able to free up that much of your mind and energy is probably very helpful. Like you had said, gives you a sense of freedom.
While at the same time giving you a sense of control. This sort of meets both the need for uncertainty of our 6 human needs and variety of our 6 human needs. And having some control often gives you a sense of significance. There's a reason I said this is one of the most helpful things that I've ever come across and completely changed the way that I run my life. I am using this mindset as often as I can because it is just incredibly valuable.
So I can't control my cats. They're maniacs. They're our children, but they're maniacs.
Yep.
However, I can control the way that I react to a situation where they're fighting and stuff like that, instead of getting all, oh my gosh, this is all out of my control. I can't do anything about this. Oh, this is craziness. Instead of just being like, all right, you guys need a break. Separating each of them and moving on. That's something that I can control because they're 10-pound little fluffy things. Whereas I can't really control how they're going to handle a situation.
Yeah, that's a really great way of putting it because, there's a reason there's the term trying to herd cats.
You can't.
Let's go ahead and kind of dive into what you just said about how we focus on what we can control first. We're going to split focus on your locus into what you can control and what you can't, and how we handle them. So let's talk about that first part. The human brain can only focus on one thing at a time. When you're multitasking, you're not actually focusing on one thing. Your brain is repeatedly bouncing back and forth between the two tasks, splitting its processing power, and usually making you less efficient. Remember when Anna talked about present priority? For the episode about navigating life changes? Choose your present priority out of the things that you have control over. From there, take action. Do what you have control over. Figure out what's most important. Start doing those things, using your agency. Remember, agency is power. Where I actually find the most benefit from this is when I combine perspectives of reality with locus of control. It creates a massive power, and they have incredible synergy. You have control over your conscious perspective, at least primarily. When you use that with locus of control, when you focus on your locus and take control of your conscious perspective, you realize that in any given situation, you have some control. Like you just said, Hannah, you have control over how you react to things. You have control over the way that you view things, over your perspective. You have some control over your thoughts, over the words that you say, over the actions that you take, over the way that you react to things. even somewhat over your emotions. You may not have full control over your mind, but you have quite a lot of control over it. And by harnessing that perspective, that is one of the ways that you can supercharge the control that you have over a situation, because you can experience things totally different as a result. In fact, Marcus Aurelius, who was the former Roman emperor for almost 20 years, and other followers of Stoicism, believed in this concept of combining taking control of your conscious perspective with focusing on what you can control and not worrying about what you can't. They found that this gave them so much more power over their life and their situation to accomplish great things, which makes both of these fundamentals combined a huge part of Stoicism and that whole philosophy. According to a popular article in Psychology Today, there are actually 4 pillars of personal agency. These pillars are forethought, implementation, self-management, as well as learning and adapting. Forethought is deciding to take a challenge, thinking ahead, and setting goals, as well as making plans. Implementation is taking the first steps, enacting the plans, and persisting towards that success. Self-management is taking care of yourself, dealing with emotions and stress, and maintaining good health to sustain your efforts. And learning and adapting is monitoring your progress, rethinking strategies, tactics, and making effective adjustments.
So how can we start to focus on our locus? Where do we begin?
In addition to using that process where you sort out what you actually have control over and what you don't, and of course the taking action piece of it, that is the whole point, I would say the first place to start is with that perspective. Then I would start looking at the ways that you're reacting or the words that you're using in a given situation. Maybe how you're speaking to yourself internally. Whether you're taking responsibility or ownership of a situation, there are other ways that you can get agency, like planning ahead for something if you can't do something about it right now. Other ways that people can feel more agency or control is by being present or praying or even manifesting, by harnessing the law of attraction, learning, growing, taking a curiosity mindset where you can learn or grow from almost any situation is a way to take back your agency, which is where we come to this understanding that life can happen to you or life can happen for you. You can take any given situation and learn things from it and have it help you grow, which means that life is happening for you, even if it's really unpleasant in the moment. You can actually ask people in situations, what do I actually have control over? In a work situation, they can tell you what things you're allowed to do. Other people can help you figure some of these things out. Sometimes you're too stuck in your own mindset to realize where your control actually is. And if you ask other people, they may think of things that you may not have even thought of. You can ask for help. It sounds like a weird way of using agency, but you don't always have to do it yourself. If you don't ask for something, your chance of getting it is not that high. If you ask, the chance of getting it goes up astronomically. Asking for help is a way that you can get other people to help you, which actually gives you, with that person as a team, more control over the situation. And then kind of the reverse is setting boundaries. If you set a boundary with somebody, you're taking control over that aspect of this relationship that you have. Internally, you are deciding that there are certain things that you are unwilling to tolerate. And by setting a boundary, you are respecting yourself and teaching that person how to treat you, which gives you more control over that situation.
I like that you shared all those examples because I feel like a lot of times I think about having agency as like fixing the problem, finding a solution, like as soon as possible. Whereas you kind of stated that there's a lot of different places in your life that you can give yourself agency over.
Yeah, I just want everyone to see that there are so many different ways that you can do this and how applicable it is in almost every situation.
All right, well, full disclosure here. We just got back camping a few hours ago. It wasn't super far away, probably about an hour drive or so. And we got home. We'd been home for a couple hours. We started recording this podcast. So up until this point, this was a few hours ago. And then I realized that I think I forgot my watch in the shower at the campground. So we're like, all right, what do we do? Instead of panicking and right away going into, oh, woe is me, it's gone forever, that sucks, now I'm out of that money, we kind of like stepped back and we took a look in both of our cars through all of our camping equipment. We tried calling the campground, no answer. So then we're like, all right, we don't want to really ruminate on this and worry about it. Like, the best we can do that's in our control is to drive out there and see if it's still there. And luckily for us, it was. So that was pretty cool.
I think it definitely helped that we were just talking about all of this, because the second that you said it, we both sort of just snapped into this, figuring out what you remembered about it, and then from there, okay, what do we have control over? And then as soon as we figured out the things we could do, we did them in order of what made most sense to do in whatever order. It was just a really good, efficient way of doing it. It kind of dawned on me on the way over that we did everything in our power by focusing on our locus. It was just this nice example of how to put this into practice.
Mm-hmm. We did the damn thing.
But this was more about how we took the control that we had. We did the things that we could. We took our agency. We had some control in this situation. I want to talk a little bit about how there are situations where, other than essentially your mindset, you don't really have any control, and why it's important to do the second half of this, which is the not worrying about it, not spending time on it, the letting go, the acceptance or detachment.
And the freedom that comes with that.
Exactly. How do we give ourselves this freedom? There's a number of different ways that you can look at it, or strategies that you can use, but all of these different concepts that I'm about to bring up are different approaches to essentially doing the same thing. When there are things that are out of your control, you can take any of these approaches. Letting go. When something happens that you don't have control over, just let go. You don't need to latch onto that. You don't need to be holding on to that thing that you can't do anything about. You can just let it go. There's a phrase that says, let go so that you don't fall. It means that the act of choosing to let go is what gives you that freedom, instead of having yourself clinging until you can't hold on anymore and then you fall and you feel the fall. In Jay Shetty's book, Think Like a Monk, he talks a lot about the different ways that monks think and how they learn how to breathe differently, how they learn how to think differently, and one of the major topics that he talks about is detachment. He also touches on multiple different misconceptions about detachment and what it really means. Many people think that detachment means owning nothing, having nothing, caring about nothing. Well, first of all, most of those things are almost physically impossible, and some of them are actually impossible. Detachment doesn't mean owning nothing. It really means letting nothing own you. Detachment is a process, not a destination. When you feel you have strong attachments to things, especially, say, an outcome that you don't have any control over, it's better to just let go and detach from that. C'est la vie, the French say, or such is life. It just means it is what it is. It's going to happen, and you can just let it happen when you can't do anything about it. That's where that freedom comes. When there are things that you don't like that are out of your control, or even things that you do like that are out of your control, often the best way to handle them is to accept them, or even possibly embrace them. And the best way to do that is to be present and in the moment. When you're present, you're not worrying about the things that could be coming in the future, and you're not stressing about the things that you messed up in the past. When you're in the present moment, hearing the things around you, and actually experiencing life, it makes it a lot easier to not worry about the things that you don't have any control over. Sometimes it's about moving on. If something has been out of your control for a long time, or you've had very little control and you've been trying to use that little bit of control and it's not working, it's time to move on. This is how you get past it.
The moving on really spoke to me. I feel like sometimes I get so caught up in something that it's really hard to move on when you're feeling all the emotions around that. A lot of times it's kind of like you want to justify it, you want to ruminate on it, dwell upon it far too much. And honestly, I can't even think of a single time that truly actually helped in the long run. Usually makes me more miserable and usually more bitter than it would have if I would have just let it go and moved on.
To be honest with you, I don't know if I can think of a time either. It's pretty universal how helpful this is. Mel Robbins actually talks about a concept that she calls the let them theory. I believe she's writing a book about it, but she talks about it during her podcast, the Mel Robbins podcast.
She is. The book doesn't come out till next year, though. I'm fully in the loop on this.
Of course you are.
I love her.
In this let them theory, she talks about how people need to get much better at just not trying to control other people. There are way too many situations where people are trying to control, socially manipulate, worry about every little thing about other people and how they're going to handle their life. And in all honesty, you might have some influence, and sometimes it's a good idea to use that influence for people that you care about. But most of the time, you should just let them. That's how they learn. That's how they figure it out for themselves. You can be helpful, but Brené Brown says, sometimes help is just the sunny side of control.
Could you elaborate more on that? Like, what does that mean?
What it means, and once again, Brené Brown is a different person than Mel Robbins. She is a researcher on vulnerability and shame. What she means is that when things are taken to extremes, there are definitely times where people say they're just helping, but really, they just want you to do it their way. They want to step in and control the way that you're doing something, so they're helping. Don't be that person. Sometimes help is just the sunny side of control.
That's pretty good. I've never thought of it that way. And I feel like I've definitely done that to you a few times when I want you to do something my way, even though it really doesn't matter.
Look, we're all human. We're all going to make some of these mistakes. It's about learning from these things so that we can try and do better going forward. But back to what Mel says. She says, you will waste so much less time and effort and energy if you just let them. So much peace will come from this habit. Stop trying to control situations with people where you have no agency. Just let them. Letting people fail and not bailing them out or enabling them allows them to learn from their mistakes and learn what's important to them. Now, there's obviously some exceptions here. It's important to set boundaries. Advocating for yourself is important. You should not just let them if they're discriminating against you. If you're in a dangerous situation or your safety is threatened, don't just let them. There are obvious exceptions to this, but the point that I'm trying to make is in normal situations, it is very freeing to just let them. You don't have control over people. I do this all the time. It honestly keeps my sanity.
Another thing is that when Mel talks about it, she almost talks about it as you're getting a little attitude with it. Like, let them. Okay, someone cut me off in traffic. Let them. Someone took the last good grocery cart. Let them. You kind of still get the last say, even though it's in your own head. And I feel like there's a little bit of a freedom of being like, that's up to them. Let them. You have no agency over that.
This actually kind of reminds me of the Taoist saying, Wu Wei, which basically means just let things run their course. Go with nature. Don't swim against the stream. You're still in charge of doing things for yourself, but when you don't have any control, sometimes it's just freeing to just let it, let them, let it go. Mark Manson, the author of The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, talks about the concept of not giving a fuck in his book. What he's really trying to tell people is that there are way too many things that we're caring way too much about. We need to learn how to not care so damn much about a number of different things, especially the things that we don't have any control over. But there are a couple subtle caveats to this not caring mindset. It's impossible to not care about anything. Not caring does not mean being indifferent. It means being comfortable with being different. The second thing is that to not care about adversity, you must care about something else that is more important than that adversity. We are all going to run into adversity and things that make life harder. It's an inherent part of life. Whether you realize it or not, you are always choosing what you care about. So choose wisely, choose consciously which things that you're actually caring about, and stop putting so much stock in things that you don't have control over. What you focus on expands. If you focus on everything that sucks and is going wrong, those things are going to expand. If you focus on everything that you don't have, those things are going to seem like bigger holes in your life. This is where chasing happiness can actually chase it away. If you're focusing on how you're not happy, you are actually making the fact that you're not happy expand.
It's like digging the pit that you're in deeper and deeper and deeper till you're just stuck.
Suppressing your negative emotions actually makes them get more intense. That's why I'm such a big proponent of actually letting yourself feel them first. And giving yourself self-compassion for your emotions. Then taking your agency. Then addressing your perspective.
So you're saying to allow yourself to feel frustrated in the moment, acknowledge that you're frustrated, and then come up with like an action plan?
I'm saying if you feel like you need to acknowledge being frustrated first, do that.
Okay.
There are times where you're just going to be able to jump right into it and take your agency. But if you're super frustrated, you might just need to take that second.
Right. Just sometimes taking that moment to allow yourself to feel that way honestly allows you to get over it faster, as opposed to just stuffing it down and saying, oh no, I'm all right, when in reality you're really not.
Happiness and unhappiness. They're both always going to exist. Unhappiness was and still is evolutionarily advantageous because pain creates motivation. Pain is real. Suffering is giving meaning to that pain, which makes suffering a choice. Feeling incredible amounts of pain is something that we are all going to have to go through. But making it mean that you're bad, or that you should feel bad, or giving it meaning and ruminating on it, staying there in that pain, driving the nail in more, that's suffering. And that's a choice. And you don't want to be there. That's a terrible place to be. Which is why, when you don't have control, let go. Solving problems can make you happy. Everyone is going to have a struggle. Where you have agency is where you can choose your struggle. What pain do you want in your life? You know there's going to be some pain, so choose the pain that you want. Now, these are all concepts that he talks about, and I thought some of them were interesting and helpful for this in kind of illustrating that things aren't always going to be rosy, and you have to exercise your agency, and you have to exercise your ability to not care or, not give a fuck. Dale Carnegie, author of How to Win Friends and Influence People, a best-selling book that is a timeless classic, also wrote a book called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. This is not a new concept. This comes from many different, very intelligent individuals from all across the world, of different life experiences and different time periods. Bruce Lee talked about the concept of being like water, being flexible, being able to be rigid when you need to, and being able to let things flow when you need to. This is essentially the same concept. And finally, when you're asking yourself, what do you have no control over? Remember, OPO. Other people's opinions. You can't control what other people think of you. And you're never going to be able to, no matter how much you'd like to. Other people's opinions should not define who you are. Stop worrying so much about what other people think of you. Stop caring so much about other people's opinions of you, because you will never be able to change them, and they don't define who you are. You do.
So, are there any problems with locus of control?
I want to say no, but that's not quite true. It's where I touched on it earlier. I guess it's not really a problem with it, it's just when you take it to an extreme, or if you don't actually do a true evaluation of what you can and can't control, or have a skewed view of it, yes, things could hypothetically go wrong, but not any more wrong than they would already. The biggest thing I would say is what I touched on earlier about making sure that you're not making yourself wrong, and that it's okay to have emotions, and it's okay to give yourself that self-compassion for not always living up to this. Because that's much better than shaming yourself for it. I don't know if you're detecting a theme, but shame is a terrible long-term motivator. And it's almost never helpful, if ever. So that's not really the right answer in any situation. We need to give ourselves that self-compassion, let ourselves feel our emotions when we need to, and focus on our locus.
My top takeaways from this episode are focus on what you can control and stop worrying about and spending time on the things that you can't. Take back your control and find your agency and let it go. And you know what? Let them. So, focus on your locus, guys. Have a great week.
We'll see you guys soon. Only 2 more fundamentals to go. It's important to remember the information I provide in this podcast is not individualized. It's generally beneficial and helpful, but it isn't specific to your situation. Everyone should look at their own situation and understand how these concepts apply to their own life. Now, if you are looking for personalized advice and are interested in individualized coaching, feel free to reach out to me at sagecoachingsolutions@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to the Sage Solutions podcast. Your time is valuable, and I'm so glad you continue to choose to learn and grow here with me. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on more sage advice. One last thing. The legal language. This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. No coaching-client relationship is formed. It is not intended as a substitute for the personalized advice of a physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional.